Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to VARC Solutions Bookkeeping Academy. Today, we are going to go over some tips and tricks to make a cleanup process easier for you. This will be more of a discussion as opposed to actual instruction on how to use QBO, etc. So please feel free to interject at any time with questions, etc. Right. So you have been contacted by a client who needs their books cleaned up. Perfect. Wonderful. Where do you start? My suggestion is to begin with a meeting with the client. Phone call, Zoom, whatever works. Emails work, but people tend to repeat things that are very important to them. So I recommend a meeting where you can actually hear them speak. So once you've got your meeting, my suggestion is to start with their goals. Obviously, the goal is to clean up, but it goes deeper than that. So in order to get their books current, are they just needing the books ready to file taxes, but nothing too detailed? Do they need more? Do they need invoices, detailed payroll, and the like? Or are they doing high-level analysis and reports to make future decisions using classes, custom fields, etc.? If they need some help defining their current needs and goals, here are a couple of starter questions. Do they use QuickBooks sales and purchase forms, like invoices and bills, or are they strictly making deposits and writing checks? How many financial institution accounts do they have? That's banks, credit cards, loans. Are any of those linked to the bank feeds? Do they run payroll? Is it through QuickBooks or a third-party provider? Do they charge and remit sales tax? One state, multiple states? Do they have inventory? Is it native in QuickBooks or is it brought in from a third-party provider? And then finally, do they have any other third-party apps bringing info into QuickBooks? So when talking about level of detail, what does a less detailed versus a more detailed entry looks like? So you have a restaurant owner has hired your firm to get the last year's books in order for taxes. Do they want very specific, high detail entered for last year, or do they just need income and expenses entered for taxes? So if they need income and expenses entered for taxes, your deposits are going to go into sales. Your purchases are going to get lumped into various categories. You still need to watch for outliers. For example, a large deposit may be an equity contribution or a loan. And you still need to confirm with your client that the end result looks reasonable to them. This less detailed approach is not going to capture each and every detail, so it may not be as accurate, but it is good for taxes. If on the other side, if they're wanting a more detailed approach, they want to track what they purchased and sold. That may be entering daily sales from their current point of sale system and tying to bank deposits. That may be looking at orders and receipts from vendors and tying those to the charges that hit their credit card. In short, it's a lot more work and a lot more hours for you, but it's also more accurate. Keep in mind that during a cleanup, you can always use that less detailed version to get current using the more detailed entry for the future. Speaking of moving forward, while you're in that meeting with your client, what are their future goals? Once QuickBooks is caught up, what are their pain points? What would they like to be done differently? Are there any accounts that need to be added? Maybe they'd like to separate their income into recurring versus project to better anticipate cash flow. Are there third-party apps that could maybe make their processes more efficient? So one of my examples is a client has an outside third-party payroll provider, and it does not sync with QuickBooks. So they are coding their expense to wages, and that's kind of it. They want more detail in the reporting. So let's talk about a couple of possible solutions. Some payroll providers can link directly with QuickBooks and will bring that info in with a sync function. If a sync can't be set up, can payroll reports be run from the provider and then subsequently entered into QuickBooks? Maybe you enter checks, maybe you enter journal entries. There's a couple of different ways. And then I'm a terrible salesperson. This is a joke around the office. But perhaps they may consider switching and running their payroll from QuickBooks directly and save you that syncing subsequent entry step altogether. And finally, while you're still with your client, you need to manage expectations. Managing expectations is probably the hardest thing to do, but it is the most critical. For example, when will you be working on their books? If you're logging into their computer, perhaps they have QuickBooks Desktop, how will that be coordinated? If they have QBO, do you have the appropriate QBO accountant invite? How long do you expect this to take? Should this take you a day, a week, 3 months? Setting this expectation up front will hopefully help you avoid those "are you done yet" check-ins. Okay, let's be honest, they're still going to call, but it can help. You are going to have questions. It happens. What is the method those questions will be delivered to your client, and how and when would you like them to be answered? Will you have a weekly phone call or an email update? I personally recommend sending all your questions in written format so that they have a list to work from, but this is up to you. What are your deliverables? Sometimes, if you and their CPA both have access to their QBO file, it may be as simple as an email letting them know that you are done. In other cases, they may want specific reports and specific formats to be delivered to a certain portal. Is that defined? And then finally, what are their actions? This may be just the list of documentation that you need for verification. But again, this will depend on your conversations. And let's talk about documents. So I would like to add a note on document sharing. There are many, many apps out there that will assist with this process. If you have security concerns or wish for more automated processes, I highly recommend checking into those document sharing apps. But this process can be as simple as emailing back and forth. So my list is not exhaustive, and it will depend upon the conversations you've had so far. But here are some examples of verification documents. Bank statements. If you can get access to their financial institutions, having your own username and password, that is so much easier. But if they want to send you PDF statements, keep in mind that some banks will put copies of checks and deposits on their statements and some do not. You may need additional information. Aside from bank statements, there's credit card statements, loan statements. Do you need sales tax payment history? Do you need those payroll reports we talked about? Do you need inventory counts, hopefully with values? I also recommend that you have some kind of tracker, like this little spreadsheet that I have here, so you can, well, keep track of what you have and what you need. But again, that is always up to you. All right, I swear, one day we're going to get started on the cleanup. But before you begin the cleanup, I recommend a quick review before you jump in. This is something you can do while you're waiting on that documentation, and also may assist you in refining that documentation list. So what are my steps for my review? The first would be creating a questions account. You can use one of the QuickBooks standards. Desktop has Ask My Accountant, or QBO has several. They have uncategorized assets, income, expenses, or you can create your own. Our VARC standard is to create an other expense account called VARC questions. It ends up, because of the alphabetization, oh, that's a terrible word. It's usually the last line on the P&L, so it's really easy to find, but you can name it whatever you want. Heck, call it "What is this?" Why are you creating this account? Because you're going to have questions. It's going to happen. So prepare a place where you can code that mysterious bank charge and keep moving. Don't get bogged down in research while you have momentum. The other nice thing about having this account is that this can be one of the things you send to your client as your list of questions to be answered. But for now, during the cleanup, it's going to be your move forward account. The other thing I like to do, which I've kind of shown here, is I like to add the last few digits of the account number to the end of the QuickBooks account name to easily identify accounts when coding. This is extraordinarily handy for transfers and the like. Then I suggest a mini review for general trends. So I may look at all of my January statements and just take a look. Okay, they've got these 3 checking accounts. Payroll is paid out of 6057, but that money comes from 9435. Looks like their credit cards and loans are also paid out of 9435. And 7006 appears to be just a money market that gains interest, whatever. It doesn't really matter. Then you need to see what they have done already. Did they have a bookkeeper through April, but then nothing has been done for the rest of the year? If that period is included in your cleanup timeframe, for example, last year, you still might want to check those are correct because you are going to be the one that's responsible for it. And then finally, and this is a gratuitous plug for the Bookkeeping Academy, I would recommend you watch one of our previous videos on red flags on reports to find larger issues before you start. So now, as promised, the fun begins. There are so many pieces to clean up, but there are three main pieces: data entry, fixing, and then reconciling review. Depending on what's been done previously, probably a mix of all three. Data entry will be the actual entries, right? Entering, coding, matching to bank feeds based on the expectations that you and your client discussed, level of detail, etc., and will look different for every single client. So assuming their info is not already imported via bank feed, AppSync, or manual entry, let's talk about some time savers. In this beautiful world of technology, why are you still manually typing in every single bank charge? Here are a couple of my time savers. QuickBooks Desktop and QBO both have bank feeds. Can those financial institutions be connected? If they cannot be connected, or maybe your client is just against it, can you manually export and import the activity from the financial institution's website to the bank feed using the .qbo file type? Also, if you're in QBO, did you know that you can upload CSV files to that bank feed? For large data entry projects, I have absolutely copied and pasted info from a PDF statement, manipulated it in Excel, saved it as a CSV, and uploaded it to the QBO bank feed. Did it take some time to do that? Sure. But an hour manipulating Excel was much preferable to multiple hours of manual data entry, and then later fixing all of my human error entries. So I think it's worth it. And then the final tip, of course, is to check to make sure that the whole time period downloaded. You may need to manually import and export those missing timeframes, especially really, really old ones. And then last piece of data entry, time savers. I do prefer the bank feeds, but if the bank feeds are unavailable and you have access to that info in a format such as Excel, have you considered a third-party import tool to get that info in without manual entry? So you've got all your data entry done. Let's move on to fixing things that are already in QuickBooks. Fixing may come before data entry, may come after. You'll have to start and know what makes sense. And again, this list is not exhaustive, but here are some common things to watch for. Duplicate, incorrect accounts. Oopsie, their deposits were previously input into the checking account, but it actually should have been in another. Does it make sense to move those entries, merge the accounts? I'm not sure. Uncleared transactions. Are they really uncleared, or is there a single bank entry, but two payroll liability payments? Here is that reminder to check your questions account for possible matches. Matching and removing duplicates, as you see below on the screen. In this example, you have a bank feed entry that was entered as an expense and a bill payment that are for the same thing. Make sure you delete that bank feed fake expense. In QBO, it'll go back to the bank feed, and then you can use the real transaction to match to. And then finally, the bane of my existence, I have to mention payroll. Payroll is tricky. Assume, unless you are told otherwise, that any paychecks and payroll liability payments entered in QuickBooks are set in stone. For example, I had a client that ran their payroll through QuickBooks, but then they would write checks to their employees. So the net pay would be $91.51, but they would write the check to their employee for $92 even, 49 cents difference. That 49 cents will wreck your filing. So I would move that 49 cents to an employee advance account, and then it should be deducted from a future paycheck. That way, payroll reports that are submitted to the federal and state governments match the amounts that the payrolls actually received. Yes, payroll is a huge pain in the bum, and that could be an entire bookkeeping academy on its own. So now that you've entered everything, you've fixed all the previous data, are you done? Sorry to say, probably not. Once you have reconciled all your accounts using the documentation, I would review again. Some of your red flags may have been solved in the process, but probably not everything. Remember that questions account? Is it empty and beautifully clear? I know you're shocked, but again, probably not. Below is an example of using that account as a list that you can send to your client for review. All of your questions will need to be answered by your client or perhaps their tax professional, and that may take some back and forth. This is where that earlier discussion on questions being delivered and how and when you would like those answers to come is so handy. But now, huzzah, all questions are answered and you're finally done. What are your next steps? Well, back to that initial conversation and perhaps subsequent conversations. What are your deliverables? Even if you are just letting the client or their CPA know that you are done, you should have some final action. Are you and the client parting ways till next year? Or are they transitioning to a normal recurring client? Are you going to assist them to implement that new payroll sync? Either way, you have completed the cleanup and can finally send that invoice for all your hard work. Does anyone have any questions for me?
God, no, Angie, you're so rad all the time, forever.
I tried to make it shorter this time.
Good stuff. Any questions, anybody? If you're there and you've got any questions, go ahead and put them, either raise your hand, say it out loud, or put it in chat. Otherwise, Angie, great job, as always.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. So for those listening in, as always, we record this, we will save it. Angie, if there's any notes that you wanted to share in terms of the slides or just notes that you had on the screen, feel free to send those and then we can get those shared out as well for the team. All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
We'll talk soon. Thanks, Angie.
Thank you, Angie.